Okay. So we're recording the class as always. This is me again, Dr. Samah, and this is Cezanne, chapter 3, right? We started Cezanne last time, and we're finishing him off today, inshallah, or tonight, right? Okay, let me just check that you guys can see what I am sharing. Can you see what I'm sharing? I'm sharing the book. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes,
doctor.
doctor. Yes.
Okay, good. So it's Cezanne, everyone, and Cezanne, of course, is a French painter from the 19th century, like we said the other day. And we said that the reason why we're featuring Cezanne and nobody else, I mean, given the fact that you have a huge list of 19th century painters, the reason why we're featuring him and not others is the fact that he is a maverick, that he is different, and he, with his difference, has charted a new school of painting, and that new school of painting would be in sharp contrast to an existing school of painting that takes or used to take its inspiration from classical Greek and Roman models. So with Cezanne, we're moving towards the future. With traditionalists, we are the direction is obviously to the past. So Cezanne is a modern painter, modern in the sense that he does not subscribe to the old forms of painting. He has his own unique style, which happens to be consistent with the tenets of modern modern arts, and I mean, when we talk about the expressive arts in general. Um, let's go straight to where we stopped. Remember, we spoke enough about where he is from. Go very quickly. So we spoke about the fact that he came from the south of France, where the countryside is, and we said that if people who come from the countryside are normally very talented. They have their heightened sensibilities when it comes to the arts and literature, and this is obviously with good reasons. The fact that in the south you have pure nature, you have innocent individuals, you have simple people. You have, of course, greenery all over the place. Obviously, these are things that enrich the experience of people. It does happen that we have, of course, people with heightened sensitivities in the cities, but they are not as many, or you wouldn't compare them to those who come from them. This is how I see it. Perhaps I don't have statistics, and I shouldn't be actually generalizing and coming up with sweeping conclusions, of course. Anyway, Cezanne lived between 1839 and 1906. This is obviously the 19th century and the early 20th century. This is the time of modernity. Modernity, well, there is obviously a difference between modernity and modernism. When I talk about modernity, I talk about styles in painting, styles in literature. When I say modernism, I'm talking about other aspects of the modern life. I talk about civilization, about technology, and all this kind of stuff. So Cezanne is a modern painter, and he is part of the modernity trend that was sweeping Europe at the time. Again, modernity would mean that people would do things differently. They would kind of give up on the old styles of painting, of writing literature, and they would have their own ways. The focus with the modernist writers and painters would be the fact that their sources of inspiration should be the modern times, the present, rather than the past. They say that there is a huge gap, a huge distance between us in the modern time and ancient, ages. And why would people go all the way to the past for inspiration? A life in the modern time can have all the inspiration that we need. This is actually the point of departure with Cezanne, or any other modernist painter or artist for that matter. Again, when we talk about Cezanne, we talk about all the different types of genres, art genres, and that would mean that he tried his hand with still life, history paintings, portraiture, what else? Nudes, um, landscape. So whatever painting or art genre you can think of, you would find Cezanne trying his hand with. But again, you wouldn't see what you see in traditional paintings of that genre. He would have to tweak the genre so that it can serve his modernist purposes. Again, we spoke about the fact that his father meant for him to become a lawyer, but he said no. He spent 2 years, obviously, in a school of law, but he found that he was not cut that way. Remember, we also spoke about his longtime friend, Emile Zola, the French novelist, and the fact that Zola happens to also be from the South. And Zola was a novelist, and he went to Paris, where the lights are, where the recognition is. He went and he also encouraged Cezanne to follow him, which Cezanne did a couple of years after. Emile Zola would play a very pivotal role in the life of Cezanne, especially at the early stages of his career, because Cezanne would have bouts of frustration, which is typical of new artists. They would, when he goes to Paris, like I said, it's not all honey and milk over there. He would go there and he would apply for a chance in the annual salon, and they would tell him, okay, let's show us what you do and what you're capable of, and we're going to decide whether you're fit for the annual salon this year or not. And he would do that, and they would say, no, this is not what we want. You're not, you're not up to our standards. And their standards, like we said, were all classic and classical standards. They were traditional in their views and in their treatment of art. What we found out later was that Cezanne is not following them and their guidelines, not because he is weak, because he cannot learn the trade or something. It's simply because he has a principled position. He objects to what they do. He believes that what they do, their styles are obsolete, are not up to his own standards, if you like. He believes that he is not cut to paint the way they do. He would, of course, use old forms, but he would like I said, adjust them so that they can help him paint the way he sees fit. And the way he sees fit is obviously different, diametrically different from the way traditional painters paint. Again, we said that when he went to Paris and he followed Zola, and Zola would have to play that substantial and big role in supporting him and in saying very nice words to him, and in also highlighting the fact that Cezanne has a talent that he should use. He by default he's a talented painter, and all he would need would be to engage in some training so that he can have whatever is natural and also nurture. Nurture means training. Over time, Cezanne would apply, if you still remember, and he would get rejected, and he would apply, and he would get rejected, and there would be a great deal of talk about why Cezanne does not get accepted, despite the so many applications that he made to the annual salon, and people would think that perhaps he's not up to the job, perhaps, and they would normally say that he is technically weak. He may have the talent, but when it comes to techniques, the techniques of art, he is weak. Again, this was not true because he has his unique artistic temperament, which is obviously different from their artistic temperament. He was different, and he would, when they relent eventually after perhaps 19 years and would allow him into the salon and he would get recognized, people would say that this was meant. It's not due to lack of lack of skill. It's meant. He meant it to go this way because he does not believe in the guidelines of the salon. Again, spoke about the annual salon and how the annual salon was representing painting in the 19th century, and the fact that it is the only gate that you should go through if you would like to be recognized and if you would like to work as a professional painter. If you get rejected by the salon, you would have to think of some other job. Again, it's not only Cezanne who got rejected. Cezanne got rejected along with a number of talents. People who also think that the rules and regulations and the guidelines of the salon are rigid and are very stifling and limiting to the talents of people. If you stick to those guidelines, you're not likely to produce something unique, something original. This was the impression of those rejectees, those who got rejected. They came together along with Cezanne and they formed what we now call the School of Encryptionism. Again, how long would Cezanne stay with them? Cezanne wouldn't stay with them very long because they also have their own rules, and obviously he is against rules of any kinds or any type, no matter what the source is. So he, over time, he would chart his own unique way away from the salon. or saloon, and also away from the Impressionists. Again, we also spoke about the fact that people were polarized and divided over his talent. So traditions would say that he is technically weak, and the fact that he is not, he is a failure more or less. As a painter, he's a failure, and you also have people who would say very nice stuff about him. They would say that he's a promising painter. When he technically plunders and does something wrong, he does it purposely or deliberately, because he has a wisdom behind it. He's not following people or artists blindly. He has his own artistic outlook, and we should give him the benefit of the doubt for that. So again, you either have total support, or you have scathing dismissal and scathing attack on him. They would even ridicule him or mock him. Again, one of the art critics of the time would say that his work is prestigious and can only be compared to classical, artists. Again, like I said, he tried his hand in almost all the genres of the art genres of the time, whether we're talking about history painting, landscape, portraiture, still life, and even scenes from everyday life. Again, with Cezanne and after, the question would arise about the idea of judging a work of art and deciding whether this work of art has quality or not. There is going to be this ongoing debate on who would decide, who would judge, and why would this who judge. I mean, obviously, we're moving towards the idea of relativism, the fact that everything is relative, and the fact that beauty and aesthetics are in the eyes of the beholder. So it depends on me as a spectator. It depends on how I see what I see. We're moving from the art critics to the audience and the spectators themselves. The art critics can say something, but the audience and the spectators would say something else. Again, this is typical of the modern times. You would have this leveling process, this level play fieldness, if you like, where a spectator is as good as an art critic. It depends on the sensibility, and it depends on the effect of the work of art. Again, one of those big genres that would give credibility to Cezanne would be the genre of bathers, and bathers are female swimmers. They are captured in paintings, and this is an old genre. It goes back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome, where normally those female bathers, are taken from Greek mythology. And of course, if you talk about Greek mythology, you talk about nymphs, you talk about angels, you talk about supernatural creatures, and they are normally very white, very beautiful, very innocent, very everything. Okay, so painters down through the ages would use this genre, and they, of course, with varying levels of success. You would have them in the Renaissance, and you would also have them in the 19th century. We'll talk about the Vedas because Vedas happen to be one attraction when it comes to Cezanne. People got to know of and about him through his Vedas and how different his Vedas are. Again, we're stressing the fact that the characters or the subject matter in Vedas would be characters from Greek mythology, and these characters are for the most part nymphs and fairies and goddesses for example Venus or Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty and all these kinds of. So how different is Cezanne when he would recapture and reproduce those kinds of painting? This is actually a question that will be answered, inshallah. So Cezanne's Vedas occupies a virtually unequal position in the history of art. And this judgment and assessment is based on how they were so many times they were exhibited in different museums and in different art galleries. Again, through Vedas and the other genres, we get to know that with Cezanne, Cezanne would be a bridge between one epoch or one era or one age of art and the next. He is the stepping stone, if you like, upon which younger modernist painters would introduce their work as modern. So with Cezanne, or Cezanne's work would mark the very end of the long tradition of figurative painting as represented in the National Gallery, and it would serve as a potential point of entry to the avant-garde art of the modern period. So again, Cezanne and whoever comes after him would be considered an avant-garde. An avant-garde means somebody who is ahead of his or her time. And Cezanne was actually ahead of his time in terms of his style and the ideas that he would bring to his paintings and the way he sees the art of painting in general. So he was actually an avant-garde in the sense that he was ahead of time, in the sense that he was different from the people around him, from traditions. He would be opposing, traditional art and how traditional art captures and recaptures reality. So he was a pioneer. And again, he would be such an influence on later giants like Picasso and Matisse and others. They would even become fans to Cezanne. You would see how Picasso would attend galleries where Cezanne's work is presented, and they would also buy some of his paintings, and if a painter buys a painting of another painter, it means that he sees something that we as usual or normal spectators don't see. He knows that the painter that whose paintings he is buying is up to something. We spoke enough about those terms and techniques, and I even asked you to look them up in in art and dictionaries. And then we come to this moment where we are starting this comparison between tradition and modernity. And what is interesting about the chapter is that the comparison is not made in words. You don't have theories, and you have long paragraphs about Cezanne. It's not all theoretical. What we're doing here is that we're having a representative from tradition, somebody who represents tradition, and we have Cezanne as representing modernity. And of course, there is points of comparison. The points of comparison that we have would be um, the bathers as a genre, and other types of painting. So tradition would be represented by a very famous 19th century French painter by the name of Bouguereau. And of course, like we said, modernity would be represented by Cezanne. Again, the points of comparison, or the subject of comparison, would be bathers and nudes and other types of paintings. So then there is, so we'll have two paintings, and they are in the book of illustration that some of you don't have. But we can always, I mean, you'll hear me talk about those different paintings, and you can always look them up on YouTube. So we're going to make those comparisons based on the treatment and expressions of the figures. So obviously these are of people. So figures, you have figures. And the relationship of figures to surrounding space, how they act and react. And the evidence of brushwork, whether it's heavy brushwork or light, and what is meant in either case. Again, the art critic who wrote the chapter has his own observations, and he would talk about three differences. One difference would be the fact that when it comes to Bouguereau and how he painted the painting that we're talking about, we're going to find that his women are not given in a classical setting. So you don't have this Greek mythological setting that you don't normally identify. It can be heaven, it can be the other world. They are clearly studied from models adopting conventional status quo poses. They are proportioned according to traditional notions of female beauty. So Bourgault, like I said, he is a typical French painter from the 19th century, and he is a traditionalist. So he would work within the notions and the parameters of traditional female beauty. Again, also the idea of smoothness and the idea of gradation that we're not going to find in Cezanne. Cezanne's work is normally rough, and it is also sudden and immediate. Bourgault has mixed various amounts of black and white into his colors to produce the graduations of tone that such as rounded forms in an even light. You need to always remember that with Cezanne and the others, the other followers of Cezanne, and black color is out of the question. They never use black color, and they use instead blue. So with Bourgault, you always have black and white, and the contrast that they effect and make. If we talk about Cezanne, so Cezanne's women are more robust. If you can say that they are more lively. And they are very far from the classical idea. I mean, they are women that you more or less can relate to. And the idea of motion is very important with Cezanne. They are, I mean, his paintings, regardless of the genre, if they have people and if they have women, they are always caught as if they were in motion, they were moving. This is something that we don't see with traditional painters. Again, with Cezanne, and this is something that we're going to keep stressing and emphasizing, the fact that he's trying to break the illusion that what the spectator is seeing is reality. He says, no, this is not reality, and make no mistake about it. I'm not going to convince you, to perhaps deceive you into believing that what you see is the truth and nothing but the truth. No, there has to be a separation between art and reality. What you're seeing is art. And this is very important because before Cezanne, the focus was, I mean, a measure of how successful a painter is would be that you get intoxicated with, if you like, you can get intoxicated and get carried away with the painting, that you go into a kind of what I mean, you would think that you're part of the painting, you're one of its figures. If we have figures, you're part of its landscape if it's a landscape. So with Cezanne and the moderns, this has to stop. They say no, we have to have this separation between art and reality. So again, with Bogoro, like we said, we have smoothness, we have a gradual transition, we have a graduated surface. The surface is not rough as we notice with Cezanne. Again, with Cezanne, each mark of the brush is distinct and is felt very heavily. So, and it leaves this, this impression that the entire surface has a mosaic-like quality because of, how not meticulous Cezanne is when it comes to. I mean, he doesn't have this academic patience that a guy like Bourgault has. His work is about capturing the fleeting moments, and he is also using his paintbrush in a very fleeting way, very quickly, and he doesn't obviously have time in order to capture what he wants to capture. He doesn't have time for those niceties, small academic niceties that Bourgault would have. So Bourgault particularizes the expressions of his two women, giving them a self-consciously absorbed and abstracted air that colors the mood of the picture as a whole. So we're talking with Bourgault, we're talking about particulars, we're talking about details. So we're talking about figures that you can identify. You can always look the subjects of the paintings in the eye. You can see the eyes, you can look at them very deeply, you can even through them you can go to this world of the imagination that Cezanne is trying to stop. He's saying, no, don't get too carried away with the figures, with their different details. And I'm not going to give you details. In order for me not to allow you into this imaginary world that you're part of the painting, I'm not going to give you details. I'm giving you the fleeting, immediate moment that has to stop quickly. So in the case of Cezanne's picture, two of the women have their backs to the spectator. So With Bourgeois, you have the women looking at you. You can see through them. You can get affected and influenced by them. You can get carried away with their beauty and the details of their eyes and their other body parts to the extent that you forget all about yourself. You forget that you are in front of a painting. Okay, with Cezanne, no, this is not happening. Even the figures are giving you their backs, not their fronts. So you don't. So it's a sign of perhaps disinterest on their part. It's a sign of it's a tactic so that you don't get involved uh, somehow with them. And the next thing you know is that you think that there is no separation between art and life. So if they are giving you their back, obviously you cannot register any emotional state. Again, would we consider that failure? Lots of the traditional art critics of the time would consider that failure, and they would refer to Cezanne as being a failing artist, and they would say that his artistic attempts and paintings are all failure. Again, and they would also refer to the fact that he has or he lacks technical skill. Again, the reasons are, were convincing enough at the time when we talk about roughly modeled, paintings, when we talk about women who are unbeautiful, when we talk about the space as being the space of the painting and the surface as being shallow and uncertainly defined, when we talk about the fact that the spectator is deprived of any prospect of emotional engagement with the women because they are simply giving you their backs. Obviously, these were also signs of failure at the time if you judge using the traditional perspective. So again, this is all, according to them, would be a consequence of incompetence. Obviously, they would refer to his paintings as meaningless. If he does what he does, if he's shallow, if he doesn't have this technical expertise, it means that he is meaningless and his work is also meaningless. They never stopped for a moment and evaluating the experience and would say, for example, perhaps he's doing something different because he means what he does. It's not about lack of expertise or lack of technical talent. It's all because he meant it to go this way. It would take them years and years to come to the realization that he was doing that deliberately in order to, kind of send messages about innovation, messages about not bowing to the pressures of tradition, messages about coming up with something fresh and new.
Sorry, doctor, I have
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
and this part, they mean that Brogis, or I don't know her name, and Cezanne are both have the modernist style, and Cezanne try to copy the style of Bogreness, or I don't know.
No. What we're saying is that we're pitting them against each other. One of them would represent modernity, and the other would represent tradition. So Bourgeois would represent tradition, while Cezanne would present modernity, and the subject of comparison would be, a genre that was all over the place at the time, which is normally called bathers. Bathers means you have women who are swimming in a lake or in a river. And they were comparing, critics were comparing between the two based on those number of paintings. And we're talking about the characteristics of each painter. We're saying that Bourgault, the traditionalist, is smooth. There is a gradual transition in his paintings. His women are very beautiful. They are giving you their fronts rather than their backs. You can always register, their emotions and feelings, and you can even have the engagement that people normally have. You can get attracted to them. With Cezanne, it's different. Modernist as he is trying to create, to keep this kind of separation between art and life. In this case, you wouldn't feel that the figures in the painting are people that you can relate to. I mean, they even give you their backs, which is an indication that you cannot register whether they're happy, they are sad, they are beautiful, they are less beautiful. Okay, and this is typical of the modern age where we're not talking about, we don't have mythical figures anymore. So Cezanne, as you can see, is rooted in reality, while somebody like Bourgault would be more of the romantic type, where he has his inspiration back in ancient Greece with Greek mythology. Are you getting the idea?
Yes, thank you, doctor.
Yeah. You know. So again, uh, with Cezanne, let me just. Cezanne would even, a point that would tell you that he meant that this was all design. What he did and what he said was all deliberate. Was the fact that he had those correspondences between him and Zola and between him and his mother, where he would express um, his anger and upset against those who insist on reproducing perfect reality. He says that there is no such thing as perfect creatures. There is no such thing as perfect reality. I wouldn't even go all the way back to classical models because life, in and of itself, in the modern life, has the inspiration and the material that I need. So he meant that it wasn't just lack of experience or lack of talent. It was something that he meant, and he communicated that in his correspondence with Zola at one point and with his correspondence with his mother. So the unintentional signs of involuntary incompetence were actually the intentional consequences of the artist's determination to do things differently. He meant his paintings to look at as it did. And actually, it's very different from the prevailing academic standard that the meaning of the painting was to be found. Again, we would go back to people who would appreciate Cezanne and his work, and they would say, well, the deviation that he started, the deviation from the traditional norms, artistic norms, were all clear signs of his authenticity. Another genre that was also very, common was with nudes. Nudes are, as the name would tell you, were also the women who are undressed. And this was, remember, this is Europe. This is European standards and way of looking at things. They would we would have those nude things, and we would also judge the merits of Cezanne and Bourgault based on how they reproduce nudes. So, like we said, nudes has a long European tradition, and in order also to get recognized, you try your hand with them. And Bourgault would also be known for his nudes, but people would describe his nudes as being unoriginal and bogus, which means that they were not very they wouldn't give you the feeling that what you're seeing or what you're watching is obviously it's not about the beauty, because you can have something beautiful, but it's not very something that you wouldn't relate to easily. Again, Cezanne would try his hand in this genre, and he would also be referred to. People would consider him a success when it comes to nudes, because of the new dimensions that he added, the new heights that he took the genre to. Again, whether we're talking about nudes or any other genre, we would talk about the philosophy and the rationale behind every each painting, and whether there is agreement among critics on what the function of a painting is. We happen to have a very famous poet and art critic by the name of Baudelaire. And Baudelaire was very famous in the 19th century, and he was also well respected when it comes to his assessments of literature and also of art. Baudelaire was a modernist, or he was more or less leaning towards modernity, and he would know when there is a genuine modern or modernist painter, and he would also see that in Cezanne. Baudelaire would reflect on what art and painting means, and he would say that art is about this kind of tension between reality as it is lived now and the values of traditional art. So, according to Baudelaire, art demands a kind of tension between its abiding traditional values and its preoccupation with the fleeting aspects of the present. So, you have the present on the one hand, and you have the traditional values on the other. And it's out of this tension that a good painting comes out. He also, when he speaks about the modernity and when he speaks about reality, would talk about those fleeting aspects of the present. The fact that the modern writer, the successful modern writer, that deviates from whatever is traditional, would have to capture whatever is ephemeral, whatever is fugitive, whatever is contingent. So these are all variations on the idea of fleeting, something that does not stay for long. According to him, the half of art whose other half is so whatever is ephemeral, whatever is fugitive, and whatever is contingent is half art. The other half would be whatever is eternal and whatever is immutable. Again, he would, I'm talking about Baudelaire, he would also criticize painters at the time because of the the tendency among them to dress all their subjects in the garments of the past. So obviously, this is to the credit of Cezanne because he doesn't do that. He doesn't dress all his subjects in the garments of the past. He believes that the present moment is can be recaptured. That life, modern life, and reality can and should be the stuff of painting. Again, with nudes, you would have classical backgrounds because nudes are more or less like nymphs, individuals and figures from classical mythology. So, how can you capture that? How can you have an idealized classical world recaptured in a painting, and you want reality and you want details from real life? And this was actually the trap that Eduardo Manet fell into. Eduardo Manet was also recapturing nudes, and one of his nudes was and there was this painting by the name of modern Olympia, where he also used nudes from classical mythology, but the setting and the background was modern. So of course this was very shocking because that would assault and would attack and offend modern sensibilities because of conservative and religious reasons. In the past there was no problem having nudes and everything, but in the modern day it would be very offensive and very immoral. Again, Cezanne, because of his rebellious nature and how nonconformist and how unorthodox he was, he would appreciate what Manet did, and he would even say that Manet, by doing that, he was starting a renaissance. So Cezanne referred to Olympia by Manet as marking the beginning of our renaissance, and obviously renaissance is good thing. We're starting something new. Again, so this Manet captured this painting, this nude, and he called it Olympia. And then over time, Olympia obviously was a genre in and of itself. And then Cezanne much later would come and he would also paint a painting, and he would call it Modern Olympia. And he would try as much as he can to avoid this confrontation with the spectator. And he would succeed in that to the extent that people would refer to this painting as perhaps the best of all possible Olympias. So modern Olympia by Cezanne and his other bathers would appear relatively modern. And they don't appear classical either in setting or in style. And their bodies are imperfect. So it's quite modern. So again, the idea is that he wouldn't allow the spectator, if he presents something or paints something perfect women, very beautiful women, that would allow the spectator to imagine himself part of the reality of the painting, which is obviously something that Cezanne doesn't want. So Cezanne wouldn't allow the spectator to project himself in fantasy into a world established on the other side of the picture plane. Um, Again, he is against this idea of you feeling one with the painting and the figures of the painting. again, with Cezanne, you wouldn't feel that these paintings were painted for men and full stop because their subject matter is women. No, I mean they would be enjoyed by women as much as they get enjoyed by men, and this is obviously one of the challenges, and he was successful in that. Again, when we say how would we say that he was classical according to one art critic, and we would say that he was trying to fly away from whatever is classical and whatever is traditional. Obviously, this art critic that he was referring Revere, he was referring to the fact that he was classical in the sense that his style has um, this indefinable attraction of biblical and Greek antiquity. That his figures are simple and noble as those that you find in classical sculpture. So again, Cezanne's work appeared like a point of origin for what might come after. He was a stepping stone, like I told you. So originality here would mean the emotion the work gave rise to, an emotion deriving ultimately from the strength and freshness of the artist's own feelings before nature. The artist in the modern sense would approach his painting the way a child approaches life, with fresh eyes, with fresh perceptions and conceptions, and very innocent, not sophisticated, not restricted by convention and precedent. His work provoke and challenge rather than reassure the viewer. Again, that would all qualify Cezanne to become the artist's artist. He was, again, he was very inspirational for a lot of young artists, to the extent that they would start to buy his paintings and they would go to art galleries where his paintings are presented. We have the examples of Picasso, who would come much later, and Matisse, and we would know that Picasso and Matisse would buy some of his paintings. This is long after he died, of course. And we have, like you can see, we have so many examples of people wanting to either buy his work or attend some of the art galleries and exhibitions that were made in his name after he died. You have lots of people, like I said. You have the English sculptor Henry Moore, who bought a small composition of bathers in 1960. You have Jasper Johns, who also bought a small painting of a solitary male bather in 1989. You also have this very famous German poet by the name of Rainer Maria Rilke. At the beginning, Rilke had a very bad view and opinion of Cezanne, and he would say that he lacks the technical aspect of perfect paintings, and then he needs to work on that if he wants to make it big and stuff like that. But somehow, over the years, he started to appreciate Cezanne's painting, and he would reflect that in the letters that he would send to his wife. He would at one point say, for example, when I remember the puzzlement, the confusion, and insecurity of one's first confrontation with his work, his, of course, is a reference to Cezanne, along with his name. This is also a reference to Cezanne's name, which was just as new. And then for a long time, nothing, and suddenly one has the right eyes. So when he started to appreciate Cezanne's painting over the years, he now believes that he has the right eyes. So it is as if he's trying to say that in the past I was having the wrong eyes looking at Cezanne and his work. And he would invite people to devote time and concentration to Cezanne's work if they want to really appreciate his work. So, according to Relic, what Cezanne was trying to capture was the moment at which the painter's work made sense to him, when the initial strangeness of its form and technique seemed to be justified by its effect. So he says that effect is all in all. If you look and you don't get the effect that is designed and meant by the painter, so it means that the painter is not doing. It's about clicking. If the painter clicks with you through the effect that he is making, he is doing a good job. And this is what he eventually found with Cezanne. And then we move to another genre. And this genre is the landscape. And we're all familiar with the landscape. And by landscape, we would mean mountains and lakes and beautiful scenery and greenery. So where is he going to get inspiration for the landscape? Of course, he would rely very heavily on his childhood and boyhood experience in the south of France, where he came from. He would also express this attachment to his native province or province in the south. And he talks about the south, and he talks about the countryside with admiration. He says at one point, when one is born down there would mean the south of France. Nothing else means a thing. So it's everything for him. Again, from the mid 1870s to the end of his life, much of Cezanne's work was devoted to the rural scenery of Provence, which is obviously the south of France, where the countryside and the villages are. Again, there is this focus on the idea that in the south, life is not touched by the social and technological processes of modernization. You don't have industry, you don't have pollution, you don't have the poverty and the hunger that you normally see around factories because of the machinery and everything. It's a pure kind of life where there is obviously distances between the houses and people live a very simple kind of life. You have mountains in the background, you have rivers, and all. So it was untouched by the social and technological processes of modernization, and this is what Cezanne felt comfortable with or in. Again, he would leave after he established himself as a famous, painter. He would decide to leave Paris behind and go all the time to live in the south, where he would paint landscape paintings. Again, people would and critics would refer to him or know him as a reclusive genius, somebody who wants to keep to himself. He doesn't mix with other painters, and they would appreciate that in him, and they would say that this is authentic and primitive vigor, and they would refer to that as classical purity. Again, he would paint so many paintings. He would paint about 30 paintings that are based on and that are inspired by this provincial atmosphere in the south. One feature would get repeated and would recur in his work, which is Mont Saint Victoire. This is obviously a mountain over there, and you would find that kind of mountain appearing in some 20 oil paintings from the 1880s in Cezanne's work. Again, where would he, paint all these kinds of things? He would have a studio over there, or obviously on a hill or top of a mountain, where he can have a panoramic view of the whole village. Again, reality. He's recapturing reality with the visual effects of nature and also of modern life. Again, he would capture the fleeting appearance either of the landscape or of urban or suburban life under specific conditions of light and atmosphere. Again, he would recapture the ephemeral, the fugitive, and the contingent as Baudelaire prescribed. Again, Cezanne would remain committed to the aim of truth, to the immediate sensation of immediate. Immediate means now, not in the past. Again, he would take his inspiration from a French painter by the name of Nicolas Poussin. And Nicolas Poussin or Poussin, I don't know how to pronounce this is French. What is interesting about this guy is that he used to live in the 18th century. Was it easy? I think in the 17th century, and in spite of the fact that he was French, he used to live in Italy, and he would go and live in the country in the Italian countryside, where he gets his inspiration. He was, like I said, very famous, and he was well respected even by Cezanne himself. But again, Cezanne would also chart his own way, because with Nicolas Poussin, you have the focus again on whatever is beautiful, whatever is angelic, which is obviously whatever is biblical and classical, which is obviously something that Cezanne wouldn't subscribe to very heavily. So the similarities and differences between Cezanne's landscape and those of Poussin. Of course, typical. Both of them would have tall trees framing the space at the left. Both would have buildings catching the light slightly further back on the same, and both would represent extensive views over a large enclosed area, and both would have projecting mountains in the far distance. However, if we talk about the differences, we would find, for example, that with Cezanne, you have total absence of any human or animal life. You don't, in Cezanne's landscape, you don't normally have people or animals. With Busan, you normally have goats and goat herds, and you would have flocks. Again, like always, when Cezanne, if you talk about the quality of the painting itself, with Cezanne, you would have this roughness, you would have the absence of black, you would have this separation between life and painting and art. Okay, this is again the basic and the major point of difference between Poussin and Cezanne. And this is actually what I've been hitting on for so long, the idea that with Poussin's work, that plane is made more or less transparent. The artist customarily works to make spectators forget that what is actually being looked at is a flat surface covered with more or less expensive varieties of pigment. The spectator may the more easily become absorbed in the pictured scene and whatever incident it may contain. So this is not acceptable for Cezanne. You don't get absorbed. If you get absorbed, it means you would think, you go into a fantasy that you're part of what is happening in the painting, and this is what Cezanne is totally against. Cezanne's picture, on the other hand, the paint never quite ceases to look like paint. The canvas to appear as a canvas, however compelling the illusion of breadth and distance may be, and however poignant the sense of spatial division created by such ends. You wouldn't be allowed to think for once that you're part of the painting. Yeah, he makes sure that, and I'm talking about Cezanne, of course. He makes sure that you know that there are barriers that would limit you from walking into the world of art, because this is a world and what you come from is a world, and the two never meet, according to Cezanne. So again, it's that distinction between the virtual and the actual. And this is actually what Cezanne's painting was really about. It's about alerting you that what you are in for is art, is not reality, is an illusion, not the reality is. Again, we're talking about Cezanne and what people come out with, experiencing his work and how his work, stays in memory, and this is, of course, a measure of success. Again, we're also talking about how the experience of painting with Cezanne and how he looked at his painting. And there was this example of the models. If he is painting women, for example, did he have models, real flesh and blood models, female who go, for example, to a studio and he paints them? No, actually, he used to have paintings, so he would buy paintings where women are featured or captured, and he would build on that. But he never had this direct contact with women, and people would say that he has this fear from and of women, and also on the idea of touch. That's why he would assemble and reuse, paintings of others, a repertoire of figures that Cezanne assembled and reused over the course of his entire career. Again, that would also account for the fact that you have this quality of dispassionateness when it comes to Cezanne. There is this marked lack of sentimentality. The idea of uh, you know having feelings and having emotions recaptured is beyond Cezanne. So again, we're talking about genuine emotions that Cezanne would love to recapture, not the showing of one's emotion that I mean this kind of cold emotions that traditional painters are recapturing in their work. And we move to another genre, which is still life and the value of still life. So still life is when you have still life means that you have actually objects that do not have life. Life with them is still. Okay, when you talk about kitchen, things. When you talk about tables in the kitchen, when you talk about drawers, when you talk about cloth that they covered the kitchen table with, when you talk about jugs and porcelain, when you talk even about different types of fruit, they don't they normally don't have life of their own. So why? And of course, this genre was there when Cezanne came, and he also tried his hand with it. Remember the painting that I showed you last time that was sold for 60 million something. So it belongs to this genre that we call still life. Again, this is an example. So if you look at this is a still life painting. It's called Jug and Fruit, and it was painted between 1885 and 1887. So oil. Again, what is, if you think on a philosophical level when it comes to still life, you would, when you look at these things, and whether when we talk about fruit, and of course, that fruit is short-lived. If you leave a piece of fruit for the second day, it gets corrupt, it goes bad, and eventually you will have to throw it away, right? Again, if you live in a house and you leave the house for some time and you come back, you look at the different utensils and the different objects, you find them old or not functioning. So what is it that Cezanne is trying to say? Cezanne and the other still life painters, they are trying to obviously refer to the transience of life, the fact that our life is very short, like the pieces of fruit, that our life is short-lived, and that should humble us down. We should humble down, knowing that life is short and it will come to an end sooner or later. Again, what is interesting about those paintings would be the fact that a measure of how successful you are would be how to convey this sense of depth in them, and how also to make them feel almost graspable. Graspable, it means that if you put your hand uh, on in the painting or on the painting, you would pick perhaps the piece of fruit or something. Again, your success would depend heavily on engaging the spectator's sense of reach and of touch. So that does it mean anything beyond the literal meaning? Yes, those paintings, like we said, are they were all over the place. And this is a genre that has been there since 1600, and it became very famous in the 1700, especially in Holland, and Belgium, and these countries. And they were seen and looked upon as allegories. People would look at them as allegories. Allegories are, of course, objects and motives that would be read as symbolic. They would give you symbols. You would, for example, look at um, a rose, for example, and you say, yeah, the rose is beautiful and everything, but it is very short-lived. So it's a symbol of perhaps short life, of how short life is and how little our time is in the world. When you look, for example, at a piece of fruit, and like I said, you see how short-lived in terms um, um, of when and for how long you can keep it and you can still eat it. You know that life is also transient and short. So the commonest allegories were those that encouraged philosophical reflection on human mortality, the fact that we're mortal, and no matter how long we live, we will eventually die. So the transience, sensory, that the fact that sensory pleasures, the pleasures of the flesh and the pleasures of eating and material possession will end. They don't, stay for long. Um, Still life paintings were normally called vanitas or vanitas, and depending on how the Italians used to pronounce it. And vanitas, from the word vanity. Vanity means, when I say that somebody is vain, Vain means that he is interested in material stuff, that he is proud of himself, against the idea that he is only mortal, that he or she will eventually die. So we're talking about vanities. We're talking about vainglorious pursuits. We're talking about things that will come to an end. And this is biblical. This applies to all religions. The fact that vanity of vanities, all is vanity, said the preacher. All is vain. All is in vain. يعني قبض الريح زي ما بيسموه. يعني it's you live today, and you never know what happens tomorrow. You live for, no matter how long you live, you will eventually die. But this is what still life serve. They tell us that life is short. So they have those clear associations with the passage of time and with death. Remember that you must die. Again, you would have very famous and very common objects when you look at the repertoire that a painter, a still life painter is using. You normally have skulls, you have empty shells, you would have watches, you would have lutes, you would have trumpets, you would have swords, would have books, and each and every one of them would symbolize something. And of course, if you have a skull, so we're referring to death. If you have a watch, remember the watch that was ticking with Dr. Faustus during his remember the last day, the last 25 minutes of his life when the watch was and the clock was tick, 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 right? And also you have the trumpet. Trumpet is when you have the trumpet. What does a trumpet does? What does it do? It's normally music, and it is a sign of victory, right? So with still life paintings, it's not. It ceases to work or to serve as a symbol of victory. It is now a symbol of death. The fact that life is coming to an end. It normally refers to the worthlessness of worldly fame, and so on and so on. I mean, even books are presented in those paintings, and they would refer to the fact that too much learning would be very tiring for the body, and it can take your head away, like it did with Dr. Faustus, if you step. Again, if you have porcelain, of course, you know that porcelain is breakable. It gets it breaks very easily. This is again is a reference to how fragile human beings are. And then we move to the very last part, and it's this part is about scholars and owners, and this is a reflection of the artistic scene in France in the 19th century, during the time of Cezanne, where the artistic scene is kind of torn between the scholars and the owners. The scholars are those people who appreciate art, and they appreciate art, and they know how to judge art based on their fine education, based on perhaps the fact that they were part of the royal family that is no longer there. They are remnants of the royal family with their sensibilities, their good education. Scholars would also be art critics with their refined sensibilities. Scholars would also be the artists themselves. So you have scholars on the one hand, and you also have the owners. And the owners here are those who, by dint of their money, the fact that they have money, they go to art galleries and they buy paintings. Those owners, of course, you have to have money in order to own a painting, in order to buy one. And the owners at the time were not royal family members who appreciate art, who know the value of art. They were also not scholars. They were not also the painters themselves buying other painters' paintings. Those were, the mercantile class, the merchants, the middle class merchants who worked so hard and they became rich, and now they have all the money. Again, making it big in the world of business and becoming the class of choice, the class that is dominating and controlling and domineering. Making it big would come at the expense of education. You wouldn't have time to get educated, to go to school. So you have the owners who have all the money, who are also buying paintings, but they don't have enough or sufficient education. So you would ask yourself whether how come they are buying painting? Are they buying those paintings because they appreciate them, they appreciate art, they know the value of art? No. You would uh, um, think otherwise. The fact that, and this is actually happening nowadays, you can have a very rich individual, he has all the money there is, but he is not well educated, and he would buy, paintings and again, perhaps in order to impress on his on other people that he knows the value of art, that and he has this artistic taste. So it happened in the past, and it actually it happens now. So the owners are those middle class people who this class of merchants and industrials who would control the political scene, and they would also control the artistic scene by buying paintings. Again, the scholars would oppose them. And one of the scholars happens to be Baudelaire, whom we have met before. And Baudelaire would write saying that, yeah, it is true that you have the money to buy the paintings, but we would love at one point to see you doing that because you truly and genuinely appreciate art, not because you want to have this or that painting and you keep it in your houses so that when people come to you say, yeah, I have bought this and that. Impressing on others and trying to convince other people that you have this artistic taste, which you don't, in actual fact, don't have. So this is the conflict that we're having between the scholars who know how to appreciate art, and they happen to be painters, they happen to be well-educated individuals, and you have the owners, those middle class merchants and industrials who have all the money, but they don't have the artistic talents and the artistic appreciation for the arts. And when they buy paintings, they buy them only to tell people, to show off, saying that we do appreciate art and we know which painting is good and which is not. Again, this is all because of what used to happen in France at the time. The fact that this was a time of revolutions in the 1830s and in 1848. So the artistic and the political atmosphere got upside down. And lots of things, you don't have those past principles and bedrocks that people would depend on. The middle class or the bourgeoisie are all over the place, and they are controlling the airwaves, if you like, and they are calling the shots. They have all the money, and they started to set to come up with their own values. Their values are all material values, having to do with money. So they are not in a good position to judge which painting is good and which painting is not. So this is basically what the chapter is about. Do you have any questions, everyone? Anyone? Hello?
Excuse me?
Doctor.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a simple question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
If there's something you recommend us to study it before the quiz?
Yeah, I would recommend that you read the chapter.
Oh, so.
And you also watch the videos. I mean, the videos, I mean, if you keep watching them, we obviously leave nothing. But if you, this is very simple. You watch them and you go to the book. I'm sure you will come out of the experience of doing so very convinced, very satisfied, having lots of nuggets, information and knowledge and everything.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes.
Hello, doctor.
Yes. Go ahead.
I'm Widad. I just noticed that you sent on the group that I should talk to you. Just wanted to apologize. I didn't notice it before.
It's okay. What's your name?
Widad, you asked about me?
Yes. No. Yeah. There was this accreditation meeting, and they wanted students to represent their colleagues, and I nominated you, but obviously you were busy or something.
Yes, I was. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. Never mind.
Hi, Doctor.
Yeah. Hi.
I don't know if you have a WhatsApp group or something, but can I get it if you have it?
What's your name?
Shahad.
Shahd, is it your first class with us or something? We've been WhatsApping for quite some time. Can we have Shahd in the group? I don't know how. I'll tell you something. I'll stop the recording, and I would like you to share your number with the admin of the group. Okay, and you are on your way. Let me stop.
You.
Yeah, wait. I'll stop now.